So I was asked to really serve as a bridge to the open space. So I have 5 minutes to do that. Happy to accelerate this along. And just as a transition point, you know, the last panel was all about renewable energy, and we have a number of campuses in our network that have done major projects. This is what 54 megawatts of solar looks like, in case you haven't seen it. George Washington University with American University and the GW Hospital actually went in on this project, just got off the ground recently. And I think, you know, we're all smart people, or we think we're smart people in this room. But if you were in 2005 and you thought about how much solar was going to be deployed in 2015, I would have a hard time thinking anyone was really saying we would have 7,000 megawatts of solar now when we had 79 megawatts of solar in 2005. This wasn't on the map for people, and the world has changed. In some ways, this 5 minutes is really to put a bookend on Tony's introduction, which is, you know, how can we think about the whole of higher ed differently? And I'm going to be on the other side of the lead wall. You know, this is on the presidential side of the lead wall. This is not the investment side of the lead wall, and hopefully it'll give you some food for thought in this open dialogue. One of the things, so I run this organization called Second Nature that Tony and George really had a huge hand in shaping. Our core program is around these climate leadership commitments. This is an alignment network of presidents and chancellors who have committed to carbon neutrality and increasing resilience on their campus. There are 3 different commitments that you made, and many of the campuses that are represented here are actually signatories to those commitments. It provides this senior leadership, kind of an organizational infrastructure for action on campus. And so many of the conversations, the cultural conversations, get started when senior leaders take steps like making a commitment. And so we've actually seen real progress on campuses because of this, both in terms of renewable energy. These are, you know, just statistics from our particular network. When you compare signatory campuses to non-signatory campuses, you actually really see that signing actually matters. So about 47% reduction in carbon emissions and 27% less energy. This is a report from 2015 from the University of New Hampshire. So it's all the signatory campuses over that period. So signing matters. That's the point here. And it's not just about the physical infrastructure, the energy changes, although we focus on that a lot. Part of the commitment involves the student engagement. I mean, we have, you know, 4 campuses here. We've, you know, Yale's in the room. There's tons of future generations that have gone through these signatory campuses that in some ways can be really much more impactful than any particular piece of, you know, a solar panel or a wind farm that you happen to put in. And this is just among our network. You know, the fact that 67 campuses have included these learning outcomes in every single academic major across their campus is pretty significant. That's changing the culture of the future generations. That's really powerful. One thing we don't have is how many campuses who are signatories actually have done a lot of endowment alignment. It's just at the very early stages of this. And one of the things we want to think about is really how can that be shaped through conversations like this? If we have, you know, an alignment network like you guys have around how can we be very intentional about our endowments, and we have a presidential network that is also aligned towards climate solutions, what does it look like to bring these two things together? We've done this in a number of ways on our side, on the presidential side. We actually have worked with the White House to look at how we can scale up really early stage innovative companies. And so presidents in our network have said we want the campus infrastructure to be a place where new companies can test out their products and services. And so this campus, we call it the Campus Clean Tech Pilot Program, has been launched, started last June, the Clean Energy Ministerial, and it's likely going to be piloted in the Northeast here in a few months. I wanted to mention, in partnership with IEN, a place where this convening can happen, where these 2 networks can come together, is at the Presidential Climate Leadership Summit. So this is happening in Tempe in 2017, in February 13th to 15th. If you have an interest in convening and discussing these sorts of conversations with the senior leadership of presidents and chancellors of universities that have, you know, an alignment towards carbon neutrality, resilience, and climate solutions, this would be the place to do it. And we would really invite your participation. I know we already have at least one session with IEN, if not more. It's really an exciting time. I mean, this is 10 years of the commitments. And we're really thinking differently now about how the network can go forward in the next 10 years. So I wanted to, so that's kind of like renewable energy broadened back out to the network, and now the last step is really to go global and to think at a high level, where do we want to go from here, and how should we be thinking about the future? Hopefully this will inform our thinking, kind of put your head in this blue sky thinking. You know, now there's no reason that all these maybe previously unthought of partnerships can emerge. We've heard actually many of the institutions that were up here actually had some had a religious orientation. The encyclical was very powerful in that regard. We actually have, you know, the international agreement now, which, you know, a number of you have mentioned as a really important leverage point, where the world in which we will soon inhabit is very different than the world that we had 10 years ago for sure, and very different than the world that we currently have. And so I want to tell one brief story to kind of set our minds in thinking about what this future world could look like. And so this story is based on kind of a famous cartography example. And my friend, he's an author, John Green, told this story as part of an event in Indianapolis that I was a part of. And so I don't know how many of you have heard this, but this town, Agloe, New York, sets the context for us to think about the future. This organization called the General Drafting Company was a map-making company, and this was back in the day in the 1930s when maps were actually physical things, you know, like paper, and you didn't swipe through them. You actually had to look at the paper to find where you were going. And how map makers used to do it is that they would go out and do the surveys, they would produce these maps, and then they would create these towns on their maps that weren't even real towns. So Agloe, New York is an anagram of the two cartographers that made this map. It's not even a real place. And can you guess why they would do that?
Stop people from stealing the map.
Exactly. So you produce this map, Agloe, New York's on your map. You know, 2 years later, someone else prints a map out, Agloe, New York's on their map, and you can say, busted, right? I got you. You did not go out and do the survey work. That town doesn't exist. So these two folks, you know, Otto Lindbergh and Ernest Albers, produced this map with Agloe, New York on it. And 20 years later, sure enough, Rand McNally produces a map. What do you think's on Agloe, New York? Two, you know, dirt roads in the middle of the Catskills in New York. And you know, they get the call from the General Drafting Company. They say, you know, what is going on? You stole our map. And what does Rand McNally say? They say, no, there's actually a town there. Because you put Agloe, New York on your map, somebody kept going to this intersection of two dirt roads and built Agloe, New York. So they're turned in, this vision of what was not even real became a reality from these map makers. And it's a great analogy for us thinking about what this future can be. So if we're only constrained to the current reality, if we're only constrained to what we know to be true, both, you know, as investors or as leaders, you're never going to be able to envision this different future, and that different future will never become a reality. So I would encourage us as we enter into this open space time to really be thinking about how can I have kind of an Agloe mindset. You know, I want to create something that isn't real now, but I need to set that vision out there in order to make it true. Thanks.